Mary and Joseph lingered through the last day of the feast. Early in the morning, they gathered with their friends from Nazareth, and then the whole group set out northward. They traveled till evening, when people began to put up tents, preparing for the night. Mary set some stew over a fire, and then went to tell Jesus that it was time to eat. But Jesus was nowhere to be found. She began to run from tent to tent. People shrugged and shook their heads. Relatives were sympathetic, but they couldn't help her. No one had seen Jesus anywhere the whole day through. "He's a boy," she said over and over. "He's only 12 years old." And now it was dark on earth. The distant hills were pure black silhouettes. The only light was the fires of families who had sat down to eat. Mary rushed back to Joseph, crying, "Let's go! We've got to go back! Either he's lost on the wayside, or else Jesus is in Jerusalem alone!" So they walked all night long, alone, ascending the difficult roads to Jerusalem as quietly as they could, for fear of robbers and thieves. In the city itself, and in the light of day, they began a long search, questioning strangers, knocking on the doors of many houses. Mary couldn't eat. She had begun to suffer such torments of guilt that she grew dirty and unkempt. Her dark hair knotted and grew ratty. Her face was pale, her dark eyes staring. My fault, she kept muttering. "He isn't even 13. I should have been watching. It's my duty to watch out for him." They had been to the temple. It was the first place that they had looked, both the outer and the inner courts. Nothing, though more than once Mary thought she saw the wide forehead of her son among the people. Nothing. Now, therefore, she returned to the temple no longer to look, but to pray. It had been 3 days. Mary went away from the crowds. She thought she would seclude herself behind a column in the porch of Solomon. As she entered the place, she heard soft voices to the left, so she turned to the right. But suddenly, one high, piping voice began to speak, and she recognized it. Jesus! It was her son's voice. Mary flew around the pillars and found some 10 men sitting in a circle, old men, young men, and a boy. Rabbis they were, teachers and students, and "Yeshi!" she shrieked. All talking came to a halt. "Yeshi, what are you doing here?" Everyone turned and looked at her. Jesus turned too, but with level eyes and a maddening calm. A rabbi said, "Oh, the lad is studying the law. He has a marvelous understanding." Mary hardly heard him. She ran to Jesus and took his face between her hands. "What have you done to us?" she hissed. She was going to cry. She could feel it coming. She did not want to cry. Therefore, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Your father and I have been searching the city for days. I would never have treated my parents like this. Yeshi, I've been dying with worry." "Mama," the boy said, "why did you have to search?" "What? What are you saying?" "But didn't you know where I would be? Didn't you know that I must be in my father's house?"